Okay, stop whatever you're doing right now. Sit down, because what we're talking about today is not something that comes around often. And if you miss it, you're going to be the last person on the internet to know. Imagine this: a performer on a stage lit by 1,000,000 watts of light, in front of tens of thousands of screaming fans. And then, without warning, without any build-up, without even a dramatic pause, he executes an acrobatic move that he first performed 13 years ago. Not slowly, not cautiously, not like someone carefully retrieving something from a shelf, but instantly, fluidly, like time never happened. And then the internet lost its mind. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, I'm glad you found us, because today we are diving into one of the most talked about moments in K-pop this week. We're talking about Park Jimin of BTS, a post on THEQOO that broke into the hot section and stayed there, and a single aerial flip that reminded the entire world why some people are simply built different. Stay with me. This is going to be a long one, and every second of it is worth your time. Let's start with what actually happened, because you need the full picture before we get into the reaction and everything else. It was May 10th and 11th, 2026, Estadio GNP Seguros in Mexico City. This was the fifth stop of the BTS World Tour called Arirang, a tour that had already taken BTS through Goyang, Tokyo, Tampa, and El Paso before landing in Mexico. The stadium was packed. Tens of thousands of ARMY from across Latin America had gathered, and the energy in that building was the kind you can feel in your chest, even through a phone screen. Jimin took the stage during what was described as an improvised song segment, a part of the concert deliberately kept loose and personal, where the performer has creative freedom in the moment. Jimin did something that no one in that stadium was prepared for. He executed a side flip, but not just any side flip. The side flip, the iconic move from the choreography of We Are Bulletproof PT2, the same song, the same move, the same explosive energy that Jimin first brought to a stage roughly 13 years ago during BTS's earliest era. A move that involves spinning sideways through the air without any support from the hands, relying entirely on core strength, body control, and the kind of spatial awareness that takes years and years to develop. The moment did not even make it to the big screen inside the stadium. The cameras didn't catch it in time, which means that only the people positioned in exactly the right spot got to witness it with their own eyes. But as any seasoned concert goer will tell you, fan cams never sleep. Within hours, videos from multiple angles were spreading across social media at a speed that can only be described as viral in the truest sense of the word. And then it hit THEQOO, and everything changed. Now before we go any further, let's talk about why THEQOO matters. Because if you're not Korean or not deeply embedded in K-pop culture, you might not fully understand why a post trending on this platform is genuinely significant. THEQOO is one of the largest and most influential online communities in South Korea. What makes it different from other fan-driven spaces is that it has a reputation for being relatively neutral. This is a community that will praise an artist genuinely when they deserve it, but will also be brutally critical when there's something to criticize. Fandoms can't easily manipulate THEQOO the way they might manipulate trending charts. If something lands in the hot section on THEQOO, it means the content organically captured the attention of a broad audience, not just devoted fans, but general users who have no particular stake in defending anyone. So when a post titled BTS's Jimin instantly pulling off a high-level martial arts choreography from 13 years ago went trending in the hot section, that was a statement. That wasn't ARMY celebrating their favorite. That was the broader Korean online community stopping in its tracks and saying, genuinely, what on earth did we just watch? The comments that followed were everything. People who admitted they weren't BTS fans saying they'd watched the clip 5 times in a row. Dance enthusiasts breaking down the technical requirements of what Jimin had just done and explaining why it was more impressive than it looked. And ordinary users, the kind who come to THEQOO to gossip and talk about dramas, suddenly posting things like, how does his body even do that? And this is genuinely insane. I can't look away. That is not a fandom response. That is the response of people encountering something they were not expecting and not knowing how to process it. To understand why this moment hit so hard, you have to understand where it came from. And that means going back to 2013. BTS had just debuted. They were young, hungry, and fighting for every inch of attention in one of the most competitive entertainment industries on the planet. Among their early releases was We Are Bulletproof PT2, a high-energy hip-hop track with choreography that was, even by the aggressive standards of K-pop at the time, physically demanding in a serious way. And in that choreography, there was a moment that always stopped the room: Jimin's side flip. A move where he would launch himself sideways into the air and rotate without touching the ground with his hands, and land it. Every single time. Clean, precise, and completely unafraid. Jimin's background made this possible. He graduated from Busan Arts High School with high marks, where he trained intensively in modern dance. He had experience in Taekwondo and Kendo. He understood his body in a way that most people his age simply didn't. But even with that foundation, what he was doing on stage was not easy. The kind of strength required to execute a clean aerial flip, the core control, the timing, the courage to commit fully in the air without second-guessing yourself, is not something that just exists in a person. It has to be built, and then it has to be maintained. Years passed. BTS grew into something unimaginable. The choreography evolved. The setlist changed. The moves from the early era gradually stopped appearing in regular rotation, partly for safety reasons, partly because the artistry of the group had grown into something entirely different. And the side flip from We Are Bulletproof PT2 became one of those legendary moments that fans would reference with nostalgic reverence. The kind of thing you bring up in conversation and everyone immediately knows what you're talking about. And then Mexico City happened. Here's what I want you to really think about for a moment, because this is the part that gives me chills every time I go back to it. It's 2026. Jimin has been a professional performer for more than 13 years. He's been through a military hiatus. He's done world tours that would break the bodies of most human beings. He's grown as an artist, as a person, as a solo act with his own musical identity. And despite all of that time, all of that change, all of that evolution, his body remembered. The muscle memory never left. The technique never degraded. The ability was still there, intact, waiting for the right moment to surface. There's a concept in performance and athletics called muscle memory. The idea that skills practiced deeply enough become encoded not just in the mind, but in the body itself. When you build something at a foundational level, when you repeat it enough times with enough focus and intention, it stops being something you do consciously. It becomes something you simply are. And what Jimin demonstrated in Mexico City is that his foundation, built in a performing arts school in Busan, refined through years of training and touring, tested on some of the biggest stages in the world, is so deeply embedded that 13 years of change couldn't touch it. That's not a flex. That's not showing off. That is the quiet, devastating proof of what real dedication looks like when it's allowed to exist long enough. And the thing that makes it even more striking is that Jimin didn't announce it. He didn't say, "Watch this." He didn't prepare the audience. He didn't make it a moment. Or rather, he didn't try to make it a moment, because it became one anyway. He just did it. Because in that instant, on that stage, with that song, it felt right. And when something has been practiced that deeply, it doesn't need a cue. It just happens. That is the mark of a true artist. The global reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Within the first 24 hours of the fancam footage spreading, hashtags related to Jimin were trending in more than 15 countries simultaneously. Clips were being shared across TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Everywhere you could share a video, someone was sharing this one. And the reaction wasn't limited to the K-pop community. Professional dancers were commenting. Martial arts enthusiasts were commenting. People who had never seen a BTS performance in their lives were commenting. The common thread across all of it was the same: genuine disbelief, followed by reluctant admiration, followed by people going back and watching the clip again. On TikTok especially, reaction videos multiplied fast. Creators who normally covered entirely different topics found themselves making videos about Jimin's flip because the clip had ended up on their For You page and they couldn't move on without talking about it. Several dancers filmed themselves attempting the move and failing, then coming back to the camera with a new level of respect for what they had just watched. One comment that circulated widely said something along the lines of, "Most people train their whole lives and still can't do this, and he pulled it out in the middle of a world tour like it was nothing." Hyperbole? Maybe slightly. Accurate in feeling? Completely. In Korea, beyond the THEQOO explosion, mainstream entertainment outlets covered the story. Star News, Naver's entertainment section, and other Korean media picked it up as genuine news. Not just fan content, but a story worth telling because of what it represented. A performer demonstrating, without any warning or preparation, that the extraordinary physical capability he possessed more than a decade ago was still entirely present. That is a news story. That is remarkable regardless of who you are or whether you follow K-pop. It's also worth placing this moment in the larger context of where BTS is right now, because it makes the whole thing feel even more significant. The BTS World Tour Arirang is not just another tour. This is BTS returning to the stage together after the military hiatus that ARMY around the world waited through for years. 7 members, reunited, doing what they were built to do. The emotional weight of this tour cannot be overstated. For millions of fans, this isn't just entertainment. It's the completion of a wait that felt impossibly long while it was happening. And for the members of BTS themselves, returning to the stage together after that kind of separation is its own profound thing. Jimin came back to this tour not just as 1/7 of BTS, but as an artist who had built a solo career with real artistic depth, who had grown in ways that are visible and audible and impossible to fake. And yet what Mexico City showed is that none of that growth came at the cost of what was already there. The new layers didn't replace the foundation. They sat on top of it, like rings of a tree, each one adding to the whole without erasing what came before. Every city on this tour has given fans at least one moment like this. Not always a flip, not always something physical, but always something unexpected, something that breaks through the choreographed and planned nature of a large-scale production and suddenly becomes personal and real. That's what Jimin does on a stage. He brings something that can't be programmed into a set list. You can plan every song, every costume, every camera angle, and then Jimin will do something that no planning accounted for, and that moment will be the one everyone remembers. There was also another moment from Mexico City that night that has to be mentioned. Jimin noticed a young girl crying in the audience. He walked over, took off the cowboy hat he was wearing on stage, and handed it to her, telling her not to cry. 2 moments in one night. One that made an entire stadium gasp, and one that made one small girl feel seen in a crowd of thousands. That combination, the performer who can stop time with his body and the human being who stops to notice a crying child in the front row, that is not an accident of character. That is who he is. Now the tour moves forward. After Mexico City, the next stop is Stanford Stadium in San Francisco, one of the largest venues on the entire tour. An ARMY who are going know one thing for certain now. Expect the unexpected. Not because Jimin is trying to one-up himself every night, but because that's simply what happens when a person with his level of skill and his level of presence gets on a stage. The extraordinary doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just appears. And then Twitter catches fire and THEQOO posts start trending and fancams get shared until the sun comes up and someone is writing a YouTube script about it at 2 in the morning. But stepping back from all the noise and all the numbers and all the trending hashtags, what this moment really comes down to is something simple and powerful and genuinely worth thinking about. Jimin didn't do that flip to prove something. He didn't do it for the clip. He didn't do it because some marketing team told him it would go viral. He did it because his body and his instinct and 13 years of being exactly who he is all came together in one moment and said now. And that kind of thing only happens when the foundation is real. When the work was done not for the result, but because the work itself mattered. When you have spent so many hours pouring yourself into something that it becomes indistinguishable from you. That is the lesson in this story that has nothing to do with K-pop. That is the thing that travels beyond language and fandom and genre. You cannot fake that kind of moment. You can only build toward it, quietly, consistently, without knowing exactly when it will arrive. And then one night, in a stadium in Mexico City, it arrives. And the internet loses its mind. And THEQOO explodes. And a girl stops crying. And everyone watching, whether they knew who Jimin was before that clip or not, knows that they just saw something real. That's what we witnessed this week. That's why we're all still talking about it. And if you've made it this far in this video, you already know you're going to be looking up his old performances tonight, and I am not going to apologize for that. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment below. I want to know, what is the Jimin moment that lives rent-free in your head? The one you go back to when you need to be reminded why you got into this in the first place. Let's talk about it down there. Share this with someone who needs a reason to smile today. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves.